The following program is available in high definition on Channel 700. This program is designed and produced by the community with the support of TV Cogeco.
Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Did you know that Oakville is the safest community in Canada? Yes, it is, for 8 years in a row. And that's partly, I think, because we have such a great police force. But we could be safer. There are still obnoxious things that happen that are crime-related. One of them is break-ins. I would say the number one complaint we get is really about traffic, but number two, or up there anyway, is break-ins. And if you've ever been broken into, and I have, it's a terrible feeling, and you don't have to be. You don't have to set yourself up for that. So with us today to arm you against being broken in, and so that you can be even safer, we have Detective Constable Sarah Ruddall, and we have Constable Marc Taraso, and we have Jennifer Hartman. And Jennifer, I want to start with you because the first time I actually became aware of Oakville as a target for break-ins by, let me call them visitors, was in your neighborhood. And that led to a great big public meeting, and there was an offer made by one of the constables at that meeting to visit homes and help them harden their homes, make them more proof against break-in. Excuse me, and this was in the context that some people were surprised that they ought to lock their doors. So I took the police up on that offer, even though I didn't live in that neighborhood. And the constable, I thought my home was, I had an alarm system, and I had sort of put all my faith in that. And I had no idea how flimsy my house was until the constable walked me through it. And by the time she was done, I swear, I felt like she was having trouble keeping herself, from laughing. Anyway, I took all her advice. Excuse me, very much here. But wow, what an education for me. Mm-hmm. How has it gone for you since then, and how is your neighborhood now?
Neighborhood's doing well. The community meeting that we had a few years ago was very effective in terms of getting everyone on the same page, and like you said, really providing a bit of an education for residents in terms of how to better secure their homes. And one of the tools that Halton Regional Police Services offers is the home audit that you just referenced, which is an opportunity for an officer or an auxiliary officer to come to your home and do an exterior walkabout and identify your vulnerability to entry. And it is a rude awakening for a lot of people, like you said. It's natural for us to want to feel secure in our homes and to have trust in the builders of our homes, especially in a new community. But sometimes the construction's not really prudent to excluding entry, so to speak.
Sometimes, well, what I discovered was I had what I'll call little locks, and now I have big locks, and no lock will stop. But the idea I was taught by the the constable giving the audit was everything you do to slow down people tends to motivate them to move to somewhere that is easier.
Correct.
Well, I suppose when we all get hardened, then we get into a defense race or something. But there's something else you do that I find quite striking. In Canada, and especially in Halton, we believe in what I'll call is the Sir Robert Peel theory of policing. And he's got 12 or 13 or 14 beautiful principles of what good policing is. I like them so much. I have them framed, and I hang them in my office. And they're really a good lesson for every citizen. And the core of it boils down to no community has more policing than it wants, right? And that engagement, that desire for peace and order and good government is in our Constitution. It's, I think, embedded in our cultural bones. But that community involvement, you're the you're the embodiment of that spirit in what you've done in your neighborhood, and we actually need more of you.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to put a pitch out to everyone watching. The police are engaged in a once every 3-year process right now to come up with the next 3-year business plan. And the business plan in the police world means the goals and objectives and the ways in which we will do policing. And that community policing component is very important. Mm-hmm. And I hope that you, Jennifer, will participate in that, and I hope that we can find a lot more of you, because what you've done in terms of interfacing between your neighborhood and the police is very good for frankly the efficiency of the community.
Thank you.
So more of you, please. now, Marc, this started because on a previous show, in some of the things you said, it kind of hinted at this, and you said you had a lot. I think I joked about how my home was flimsy, and you said, well, you should see what we've got. What have you got?
Well, not a whole lot, to be honest, but it's small little things that will greatly help improve your home. All the stuff here that I brought today is all things that you can get just from your local hardware store, and everything here is for about under $150, and that's all it takes to secure your home per door is about $150.
I hold up this white thing and tell that story.
So this here, I call this the bar. And that's exactly all it is. It's a nice metal bar, and it's got so many uses. So the one way you can use this bar is to prop it up behind a door. This portion up here goes behind the handle, and this portion here gets wedged up along the door. This is great if you have a double door entry. Those doors are really hard to secure. So if you put this up behind the door that only gets opened when you're moving a couch, it'll help reinforce that door that gets used on a daily basis. Without something like this, that door is not very well secured, and one kick to the middle might open both those doors wide open. The other way you can use this on a sliding patio door. You put it sideways, and it'll actually hold the door so it can't be forced open, even if they defeat that little lock.
So when you leave the house for the day, the last one to leave the house needs to set this on the double door and use a single door to get out.
Exactly.
Right. Otherwise, there's some physical difficulties.
Exactly. And this is great. This tool it's been proven that it works really well.
So Sarah, what perspective do we need to have on this problem? It seems to me that the break and entry in a physical sense is one thing, but I got a call the other day from some very tough-sounding guy telling me that I owed CRA a gigantic bunch of money, and I'm not even sure they call themselves CRA anymore, the Canada Revenue, but you know, I've never owed them any money, and I've never been called like that. And the bullying and the pressure was really intense. And if I wasn't the mayor, I don't know if I would have been so confident in saying, what? And hanging up. We can get broken into in a non-physical way. They're trying to break into your bank account to try and, so to speak.
Yes.
What can you bring to this?
Well, I have to say, I think this kind of victimization as well can be equally as damaging to somebody as we're talking about break-ins, because it affects, a lot of the scams affect people emotionally as well as financially, and I can talk about a couple of those. The CRA scam that you've referenced already, it's very common. The callers usually are from outside Canada, and they are very insistent, and we are finding them very aggressive. As you say, they say they're from the Canada Revenue Agency. They're telling people, the callers, that they owe some money that they need to repay back immediately, and often they'll use the threat of immediate arrest. So they're referencing actual police services. Some people have even represented themselves as being from a police service, and that if this person doesn't pay this money back immediately, they're going to come to their house and they'll arrest them. And that's obviously very intimidating to a lot of people. A lot of people don't have contact with the police on a regular basis by any means. You know, they may not know individual police officers, and they may feel threatened by this call. And as you say, these people are very insistent.
And they may not know, because maybe they're not raised in Canada, but But that never happens in Canada. No police force in Canada will ever do that.
Absolutely.
And for that matter, Canada Revenue will never do that.
No.
And then in the paper just the other day, we had the case of a resident who was scammed into sending $9,000 to somebody in China.
Yes.
And that too is the same thing. I mean, you know, you could get broken into and suffer $9,000 worth of damage, or you can get hosed on the phone for $9,000.
And I think it's important for people to understand a couple of things. The CRA doesn't usually call people. It will communicate by letter to your home address. And there'll be certain things on the letter that will, convince you that this is a genuine letter. What these fraudsters are using now is what they call spoofed telephone numbers. So on your caller ID, it may say Canada Revenue Agency, but it's not, because it's a spoofed telephone number.
Can we stop that?
You know what? I don't even know if you can stop it.
There's an easy way to fix that problem. Call them back on the number that you trust. So whether you get it from the phone book, from a legitimate website, call them back and say, give me my case number. I'll call you back in 2 minutes when I'm ready.
Yeah.
And then that way you call back on a number that's trusted.
Yeah, don't be intimidated. That's the thing.
But I would say don't believe them at all that it has anything to do with Revenue Canada, because
Absolutely.
it doesn't. They don't do it that way.
That's right. And if they're saying to you, I need you to go and buy a prepaid credit card, or I need you to send funds via MoneyGram or Western Union, immediately you know and it's not just the CRA scam we're talking about here, it's a number of other scams.
So the grandchild scam.
Grandparent scam, right, exactly, where somebody gets a telephone call and they think it's, because it's a very emotional call, the person may say, I've been arrested, Grandpa, or I've been in an accident and I need money. And of course the person, the elderly person on the other end of the line, is very worried about who they think is their grandchild, and that's right, it's the same way.
So here in Halton, with the Halton Regional Police Service, can we get those people, or is the best we can do try to educate our residents against it?
They're making it more and more difficult for us to track them down. So I think education is very, very important. And that's why I would recommend that the residents of Halton do the best that they can to access brochures and things like that. For example, I have something here from the Competition Bureau of Canada. It's called the Little Black Book of Scams. They keep it up to date, and they have a list of all the scams that are popular at the moment, and it will give people lots of pointers of things to look out for, sort of red flags. And often an important thing to remember is if somebody is phoning you, it's most likely a fraud or a scam.
Yeah. Gee whiz, I say this out of sincerity, but hoping also that it'll be slightly humorous. The average person, I think, has no trouble being skeptical about anything that you hear from a politician. Why not be skeptical about everybody else that phones you? Yeah. At least as skeptical of everybody else as you are of politicians would be not a bad way not a bad ready stance if you're into sports lingo. Jennifer, in your work and in your part of our community, is there much, do you hear much about these frauds, or is it more in your world worries about break-ins and maybe traffic?
Sometimes it's a blend of both. So we've had a lot of break-and-enters in the neighborhood, as you know, and we've also at those times had an increase in energy companies, for instance, coming door to door.
I hate those.
I think that's a common sentiment. As the detective constable mentioned, they're very aggressive at the door, and we've actually had occasions where they're physically pushing past a homeowner and gaining entry into the home, and the homeowner is, as you said, terrified, intimidated, really at a loss as to what to do now that I have this person in my home, and they'll call the police, and they're not sure if this is a legit energy company or not. So a lot of the calls or emails that I get are about those, as well as the break and enter. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered what we can the police do anything about these door-to-door scam artists? I mean, energy companies?
It depends what they're doing. If somebody deceives you into forcing their way into your house, that's a criminal offense in and of itself. So if they get into the house for false pretenses, like I said, that's a criminal offense. So they could be charged. It depends how the conversation goes and how you allow. If you welcome them into your house, then that might not apply. But if they force their way past, certainly there's some criminal offenses going on there.
What if they trick you in? They trick their way past you by telling you that they're from Oakville Hydro when they're really not, or they tell you that they're from your gas supply company, but they're really not. When they, basically it's fraudulent entry. Is that, if you've given into fraud, do you lose your ability to get the police to chase them? No.
If you're tricked into something that's not right, just because you've been tricked into it and you've allowed it doesn't mean that it's become legal all of a sudden because you've allowed it. It'll boil down to the specific circumstances of each incident, and by all means, if you think that you're the victim of somebody coming to your house illegally, call us and we will investigate that and lay charges as appropriate.
Yeah. But so people should be clear, you wouldn't treat those kinds of calls as not serious. I mean, those are the kinds of community protection that you're here for, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know, and please, it's unbelievable how many people are running around our neighborhoods trying to scam you on the energy front. It drives me crazy. I actually have been visited by them, and I've seen it myself firsthand. And I don't say you're talking to the mayor. I wait to hear the thing because I'm kind of, I once in my life I was a journalist, and I'm fascinated to see how much of this spiel can I hear, but I always wind up going, now get out of town. But I've actually never been sure whether we could chase them out of town, but it's good to know that we certainly have some means to fight back.
It brings up another good point as well. Typically what we've seen with a lot of break-in enters is that before the entry actually happens, the bad guy will knock on the door for 5-10 minutes because they don't want to break into a house where somebody's at home usually. Usually they want a house that's empty and nobody's going to be home to interrupt them. And so they'll knock at the door, and if there's no answer, they will then force their way in. Meanwhile, sometimes they go into the house and all of a sudden they get confronted by people that are in the house. So what we recommend to prevent a break-and-enter in that case is if you're not expecting anybody at the door, or you think it's another peddler, I don't want to deal with them, you don't have to answer the door. Don't be afraid to be rude. Yell at them through the door, not interested, thank you. Move the curtains around, look at them through the window, turn on the stereo, get the dog to start barking at the door. Whatever will let them know that somebody's home and that you're not interested in whatever it is they're selling, and they might move on to somewhere else instead of trying to kick in your door or selling whatever scam that they're trying to sell.
And that applies also to if somebody is calling you or soliciting you through the phone, don't be afraid to be rude and say, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Put the phone down, because the minute that phone is down, that's it. That's the end of it.
Yes, and please don't call my wife. My wife is so polite, she'll listen to the whole darn thing.
Yeah.
We're such a polite society, sometimes it's hard for us, but don't be afraid to be rude sometimes. It's in your better interest. And like I mentioned, call back if you think it was legitimate. Call back on a number you know.
Yeah. And I hope I'm not sleeping on the couch tonight for saying that. So, where do you think this is going in terms of break-ins? We have a report at the police board showing crime leveling off. We're the safest community, but we still have crime. But it's looking like it's leveling off. Are you seeing that in your neighborhood? Are you seeing that in your work?
It goes in waves.
Break-ins, I mean, you just had 3 in your neighborhood.
Correct.
And has it been a long time since, and so it's a startle, or?
It's, I guess, in terms of being on the ground, it seems like an uptick, and only hindsight can really give us that context in terms of, are we really seeing a cluster? But when you're a resident in a neighborhood, one break-in seems like a cluster to you. It feels like your neighborhood's getting targeted. So people get their backs up. There's a lot more communication. There's a lot more agitation, a lot more questions. People want to know what police resources are being put on this case, kind of questions. So a lot of it is about communication and let people know that, obviously Halton Police are aware of any uptick in events in any neighborhood. But also, I don't think it's necessarily a reasonable expectation that we are crime-free. And as you pointed out at the outset, you know, we've been the safest community for 8 years running, and that's something to be proud of. And a lot of that we have to thank Halton Police. So we've got a lot to be grateful for. I think we have a lot of tools at our disposal where we can empower ourselves. So we have a lot to be thankful for.
I'd like to hear more about the tools. In fact, what a perfect segue. I mean, you've brought the hardware store with you, Marc. Let's go through the store here.
So there's two ways that bad guys break into a house. They're breaking in through doors or windows. They're not going through the siding, they're not going through the brick, and they're not coming through the roof. So if you secure your doors and windows, you've turned your house into a fortress, essentially.
Unless you go, I had raccoons go through my roof, so.
They are the mass bandit we can't catch. So in terms of windows, there's two easy things. Always keep them locked if you're out of the house, and if you're in the house but you want to keep the window open only a little bit, get yourself a small little lock which you can install, and it's just a push of a button, and it'll only allow the window to open as far as you install the lock. So if you want to open it up 3 inches for fresh air, it prevents somebody from coming in. The other thing you can do is we recommend getting professionally installed window security film, and a company will come out and they put in a plastic sheeting over top of your window, and once that film coats to your window and dries, that window becomes hard as rock. I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to hit a window with a baseball bat, and I hit it about 15 times, and I was finally on the 15th hit able to shatter the window, but then there was still that layer of plastic which was impossible to get through. And as you kind of alluded to before, it made so much noise that the whole neighborhood would call in, and after that first hit, if they don't get in, they're scurrying away because they don't want to stick around for the cops to show up. And that takes care of your windows. Two easy things.
I've got to get that.
Yeah, and it's call your local window company or your locksmith, and they can direct you to a company. Flip through your phone book, and there's lots of companies around that'll be able to do that. Just do your own research and figure out which company works best for you.
Yeah. So you're not recommending a company?
No, we're not recommending a specific company.
Neutral and objective.
That's right. Everybody's got their own perks in their own way. So in terms of your doors, again, very easy. First thing, get a good deadbolt. You need a grade 1 deadbolt, and you can get that at the hardware store for about $50. With a grade 1 deadbolt, you're getting a bolt that's got a very long throw on it, which means the door is going into the wood frame for at least 1.5 inches. If you get a deadbolt with a smaller throw, you're getting very little contact between the door and the frame. So grade 1 deadbolt will do that for you. Next thing, take off all your screws that are holding everything together and get 3-inch screws. And what that'll do is tie the door right into the studs. With smaller screws, it's just going into that flimsy trim that's kind of holding up the door, and one boot and it's going to go in. Once you've got that, we've got a couple different things. This here is called a strike plate. And what the strike plate will do, again, it's got a lot of metal. As opposed to wood, the metal will hold up a lot better to some kicks. And it's got the 3-inch screws, and that's what the deadbolt is actually going to go into. For reinforcing the door, we recommend sometimes having a steel door. That's the best door you can have. It doesn't always look the prettiest. So if you want a wood door but you want the strength of a steel door, you can buy what's called an escutcheon plate. You take off your deadbolts and your handles. This goes over top of the holes, and then you reinstall your deadbolts. It's very easy to install. It takes about 10 minutes, and all it does is it now holds the deadbolt into the door. So if they kick the door's not splitting apart.
So that sort of slides over the edge of the door?
Exactly. So the deadbolt throw would come out of here, and the handle or the deadbolt would be up here, and it just holds that door together. Again, with
a partial steel door.
A partial steel door. There you go. Again, with double doors or even single doors. If you have a glass inlaid window, they can break the glass if you haven't secured it properly and reach in and turn that deadbolt. So what we recommend if you're home is to get a product similar to this. It's called a nighttime lock. You can install it in obscure places. You can put on as many as you want, really. And first of all, the bad guy, if he breaks the window, is not going to be able to find all these in a timely fashion. And second of all, if they try and kick these, it's held in with 3-inch screws again right into the frame of the door, and that door will be very well reinforced. And again, $20 at your hardware store.
How does that work?
Basically, it's very similar to like a hotel door lock. So it goes on, and it uses mechanical force and metal on metal to hold that door closed. And to open it, all you do is you slide it up and over, and it provides the proper gap for that door to open, and it kind of rests on top. You can install on the side of the door or on the top of the door. And then finally, if you're one of those people that you like to answer the door, but you don't want to open it fully till you know who's at the door, the old chain style locks, those provide very minimal security. all those, I would recommend those for is if you have a kid inside the house who likes to wander, but you don't want the kid to get out, you could put that high up and they can't reach it. In terms of protection, very minimal. Those chains will usually snap. So this is, again, something that you might see at a hotel, and it's a paddle that closes over top of almost like a knob that gets screwed into the door, and it allows you to open the door a couple inches and see through, but it prevents that door from being open. One thing to keep in mind with this is once that door is open an inch, somebody with enough force might be able to open it up a mile. So just keep that in mind, but it does help, and it's much stronger than the chain security.
That does remind me of a hotel, that one.
Yeah, it's exactly the same type of lock they use in your hotel rooms. The other best thing that we recommend for break-and enters is know your neighbors. A lot of the times, neighbors are the ones that call in the break-and-enter because somebody's home from work that day and they're out looking around, and all of a sudden they see a car that doesn't belong because they know which cars belong there, and they call us. But they'll call and they'll say, well, if you're looking from my house out to the left, 3 doors down, the house with the red roof. Makes it very difficult for us to get there in a timely fashion and know which house you're talking about. So go out, meet your neighbors, and write down what their addresses are. So when you call us, you can say it's at 391 any street, and we'll know exactly where we're going to. Any police division, we have these cards. It's called the Know Your Neighbors program, and they can go in and they can walk around their neighborhood and they can fill it out with the name, address, and phone number of the people in their neighborhood. Keep it on their fridge so they know exactly who's in their neighborhood. Again, any police division has these at the front desk, and you can fill them out and it gets you a chance to talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, if you've ever, I've lived in cities and in suburbs and in the rural area, and I like living with people. And it doesn't make any sense to like living with people and not know the people you're living with, you know. So I totally identify with that. Jennifer, do you think everybody in your neighborhood is onto this one?
Yes. Yeah, we had Constable Draper come through door to door through Joshua Creek and hand out those cards, actually. And it was incredible, the feedback we got, that people weren't, you know, we have a lot of streets where my rear yard abuts the rear yard of someone else on a different street, obviously, and I don't actually know their address. I know they live behind me, which is not, as Marc said, helpful really in terms of response from the police. So it's a fantastic exercise. You leave it on your fridge. It's helpful for kids as well, right? Yeah. And if your neighbors are away on vacation, it's important that people communicate and say, do you mind picking up my Oakville beaver? Can you shovel me out if it snows while I'm away? Just so people, the house doesn't look like it's unoccupied.
Yeah. Well, one of the benefits of knowing your neighbors is you discover what wonderful people our town is full of. Mm-hmm. And if you run into the odd, colorful character, you've got something extra to talk about at dinner, and that's not always bad. I really appreciate all that you do to keep us safe, both of you and Jennifer, all of you. Jennifer, because you're actually part of the solution to keeping crime down in our town. I really appreciate the time that everybody's given to watch this and hopefully learn how to be better protected at home. And I hope you'll tune in next time for Oakville Matters.